$3.7 billion have been paid out to kids who've been injured by, by vaccines. So you have to know that it's not a foolproof system. The doctors and the parents have to come to a decision.
But if most doctors tell you that vaccines don't cause autism, let's say.
They'll tell you that, but then again, there's Hannah Poling, was this one girl that was ruled in this special magistrate court that she did get it from that. So
have you had backlash for your position on
absolutely, that? Yeah. Well, because what you have to understand also the media is funded by 70 to 80% of all media funding is from pharma. That's why all these commercials, you have an incredible amount of money being poured in, and it's affecting.
When pharmaceuticals got commercials where it was okay to advertise prescription drugs.
It was over. And so now you have, my dad was on 12 different prescription drugs when he passed away at 68. And I can honestly say, I don't think that those helped him. I think at the end of the day, they shortened his life. I think like the pharmaceutical, I mean, God bless the American medical system as far as if you get shot, hit by a car, run over, or broken leg or heart attack, you better hope it's in America. But for everything else, they don't know how to cure anything. So, but my point is, like, you have a medical tyranny now if they're the ones making these decisions. And I really think, we have to be careful since we spend 3 times more in America for our health care than they do in Europe. And our health care isn't any...
We're not the best.
You're not getting better results. So I think we have to question this. But if you dare question any of it, any part of it, you are viciously attacked because that's how big they are.
Brought to you by Salem Cigarettes.
The Many Loves of Toby Gillis is brought to you by Marlboro.
The second half of Rawhide is brought to you by Cool, the cigarette with extra coolness you can feel in your throat.
Tonight, Bachelor Father was brought to you by Dual Filter Tarretins.
The Flintstones, brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
I've got a daughter in medical school and a really good friend in medical school, and I've asked them, because they're already being taught vaccines are safe and effective, and they're the best thing you can do to further the health of the population. They're already being taught this. And I was never taught when I was in medical school 30 years ago what was in a vaccine. We were only taught that they're wonderful and do them. So, no, most doctors trained today have no idea what's in the vaccines.
When I went to medical school, I graduated in 1985, and at that period of time, when I went out into practice, there were only 3 vaccines, really, that were used in children. There was DPT, MMR, and polio. And it wasn't until 1991 when there was the big ramp up of the vaccine schedule, starting with the hepatitis B vaccine at birth, and then they added the Hib, and then chickenpox and Prevnar, and now we have 46 doses of 16 vaccines that are given to children by the time they're 5 years of age.
Something is happening to the brains of our children. Something is interfering with the normal neurosequencing of brain development. Because when babies are born, their brain is not developed. When babies are born, they have more nerve cells than their brains need. And it's through life experience that the tracks are laid down to create the proper sequencing of muscular development, speech development, cognitive development, and emotional development. Something is interfering with the proper sequence of those steps. Something is getting in the way of the brain developing properly. No one is asking the question, why? Why are so many kids having an interference of the proper sequencing of brain development? Why, as of January 2016, are we seeing 1 out of every 20 children under the age of 5 with a seizure disorder?
So we've had a tripling of the numbers of doses of vaccines that children are now getting. And in that time period, as this dramatic escalation of the child vaccination schedule has occurred, what have we seen? Have we seen children be healthier? Just the opposite. We have an epidemic of chronic disease and disability. 1 child in 6 in America now learning disabled. 1 in 9 with asthma. 1 in 50 with autism. 1 in 400 developing diabetes. Millions more with inflammatory bowel disorders, rheumatoid arthritis, epilepsy. Epilepsy is on the rise. We have children who, 30% now of young adults have been diagnosed as having a mental illness, anxiety disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia. This is the worst public health report card in the history of this country. And it has coincided perfectly with the tripling of the numbers of vaccines.
There was a study published in Pediatrics that showed that parents who decided to delay or forego some vaccines were parents who made over $70,000 a year and had the most education. So why is it that the best educated parents who have the highest socioeconomic income are choosing to delay some vaccines? It's not because something is wrong with those parents, it's because something is wrong with the current CDC vaccine schedule.
In 2013, the Institute of Medicine, National Academy of Sciences, issued a report that said that the current federally recommended child vaccine schedule of 49 doses of 14 vaccines given between day of birth and age 6 has not been adequately studied for safety. And one of the issues was that the vaccines may have been studied separately, but they have not been studied in the combined schedule, including giving 8 to 10 vaccines on one day. So that is something the Institute of Medicine has acknowledged. The federal government disagrees, but I think everybody needs to understand that child vaccine schedule has not been adequately studied for safety. Fewer than 40 studies have actually studied the schedule. That's not enough studies to prove that that schedule is safe or effective.
Plus there haven't been any studies at looking at the synergistic effects of the ingredients. So if you have one metal, what does it do to the body? If you have one metal and another metal, what does that do to the body? If you have one metal and antibiotics, what does that do to the body? And it's already been shown that metal detoxification in the presence of antibiotics is diminished versus metal detoxification without antibiotics. You have metal, antibiotic, and you have microorganism. What is the synergistic effect of that? So none of those amplified studies or the look at the amplification of one ingredient's effect on another have ever been done.
Back in the 50s, doctors were promoting this brand, right? Smoked Camel or whatever, and the doctors were telling you, it's good, it'll relax you, it'll help you. The tobacco companies back then knew. They had their own data. They knew that tobacco was a carcinogen, that there were problems. And once we did the huge studies, followed millions of people over years, decades, I mean, everybody today knows, right? I mean, everybody knows tobacco is a leading killer. We need to do those same sorts of studies for vaccines.
Of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
You can't go into the OR without liability insurance. What business do you know is allowed to practice and offer its service without liability insurance?
And what product that carries a risk of injury or death? What other product is mandated to be used by every single person born in this country multiple times? And there's no liability.
Proved definitely milder than any other leading brand.
If your good health isn't all that it should be, we can't help you. Better call on your MD. If it's double talk you wish, we confess that's not our dish.
But if you want a treat instead of a treatment, if you want full measure of deep down smoking pleasure, if you want a treat instead of a treatment, smoke Old Gold.
Yet it is wrong to say that there are no risks to vaccines. Even the government admits that children are sometimes injured by vaccines. Since 1988, over $4 billion has been paid out from the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Despite the government admitting to and paying $4 billion for vaccine injuries, no informed consent is used or required when you vaccinate your child. This may be the only medical procedure in today's medical world where an informed consent is not required. Now, proponents of mandatory government vaccination argue that parents who refuse to vaccinate their children risk spreading these diseases to the immunocompromised community. There doesn't seem to be enough evidence of this happening to be recorded as a statistic, but it could happen. But if the fear of this is valid, are we to find that next we'll be mandating flu vaccines? Between 12 and 56,000 people die from the flu, or are said to die from the flu in America, and there's estimated to be a few hundred from measles. So I would guess that those who want to mandate measles will be after us on the flu next. Yet the current science only allows for educated guessing when it comes to the flu vaccine. Each year, before that year's flu vaccine or strain is known, the scientists put their best guess into that year's vaccine. Some years it's completely wrong. We vaccinate for the wrong strain of flu vaccine. Yet 5 states already mandate flu vaccines. Is it really appropriate to mandate a vaccine that more often than not vaccinates for the wrong flu strain? As we contemplate forcing parents to choose this or that vaccine, I think it's important to remember that force is not consistent with the American story, nor is force consistent with the liberty our forefathers sought when they came to America. I don't think you have to have one or the other, though. I'm not here to say don't vaccinate your kids. If this hearing is for persuasion, I'm all for the persuasion. I vaccinated myself. I vaccinated my kids. For myself and my children, I believe that the benefits of vaccines greatly outweigh the risks. But I still do not favor giving up on liberty for a false sense of security. Thank you.